All right, let's get things kicked off. Good day, everyone. My name is Skender Daerti. I'm the CEO and founder of the Clinician Exchange, and I welcome everybody to another edition of the Medtech Momentum series, where we take and talk about taking products from idea to market or concept to commercialization. This is our third installment of the webinar series, and today we're going to be talking about that really critical stage of pre-commercialization. You know, in the last two prior webinars, we discussed everything from patents and getting everything ready to start to get to prototyping. And our last discussion was heavily about prototyping and getting some of the ducks in a row to get ready to get out there. Well, today we're going to talk about probably that first real critical stage in the milestone. This is where companies now have put so much money already into it. They've probably raised some seed funding, maybe even done some angel funding, and they're probably at a stage where they're starting to run a little bit lower on that dry powder, running on fumes, looking to get to that next level of capital raise to help take them through regulatory and get their manufacturing set up and get an eye towards what's it going to take to really make this a commercial success. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So we're joined today by our esteemed panel of Vas Abramov from Occam Design, Frank Ripullo from Acceleron Consulting, and Rob Ferguson, also from Acceleron Consulting. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So, gentlemen, here we are. This is that critical phase, right? At this point, as I already said, people have put in a ton of time. They've probably already put in a ton of money. This is kind of like that no turning back zone, right? You're in it. And you have to make it happen from here. So, Vas, in the last discussion, again, we talked about prototyping. Prototypes are made. We're set. We got the prototypes locked. Okay? What are the critical elements here that move into that next phase as far as design and development?
Well, I would say with regards to design development, we're entering the most complex and important phase, and that would be design validation and verification. And it entails all the testing that you have to do for regulatory, to design verification, for design validation, for users, etc., to make sure that the product that you are designing actually meets all the specifications that you have put forth at the beginning of your project. I would say it's probably the most expensive phase and the one that crashes a lot of projects.
What's like, 1, 2, 3 most sought after crash? What is it that causes the greatest percentage?
Well, I mean, it's so at this point, finances can run low because as soon as you are entering all the biocompatibility testing, depending on the product, you can run up the bill of hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s. You have to do your process, well, not necessarily at this point, but you have to go to FDA. You have to prove to FDA that your product, if it's a 510K product, class 2, you have to prove to FDA that your product is as good as better than your predicate device. You have to do all the mechanical testing to prove that your device can withstand the stresses, etc., temperatures. You have to do accelerated aging. You have to do your sterilization validation. Each one of those items has a very hefty price tag.
And all that needs to be in your design history file, right? And
that is correct. I mean, this is so basically when we were doing prototyping, right? We started our design history file, right? We were working with our users, we were working with our inventors, we were working with our engineers, and we started building that design history file. We developed kind of a design input specification, right? Now we have to prove that whatever it is that design input is matches our design output, right? So basically, if it's a drill that has to drill at such a RPM, at such a torque, now we have to do the test to make sure that it drills at such a RPM, at such a torque. So basically, like if it's green here, it has to be green there. If it breaks at 100 pounds here, we set forth at 100 pounds. So basically, we just do it kind of back and forth and verifying that everything that we wanted that product to be is that product.
So you actually have to prove yourself, basically, is what this stage is.
Exactly. And it's kind of your design history file. That's what it is. It's a history of your product. It puts in everything, that why you designed it this way, why you picked this material, and then you're going on the other side and you're proving that all the decisions that you have made at the beginning are correct for the end.
Okay. So Frank, turns out that's not cheap to do that. As we've discussed, and this is usually that critical phase in early stage companies where I just referenced before, right? They've raised some money, seed money, they've raised some angel money, and now this is usually that area where they're thinking about maybe another round of angel, or they're thinking really Series A. Okay, and is that correct? And B, how do you approach that Series A when you're still at this phase?
Yeah, there's exceptions to all the rules, but assuming you're going for a Series A, right? I see the most critical thing I see is there's not that line drawn to how the investor is going to make their money. They're still caught up in that mindset of friends and family and going back to their initial investors and asking for more money. And now they're at their crossroads, like, do I build my cap table? What do I do to expand on that? Do I want to give up some warrants or stocks, certificates? So that's a critical moment. And from my experience, the companies that really have a strong value proposition that can show they can stand the company up, execute, and start to show a plan for execution, those are the ones with true investors that understand the industry can raise money. I know this sounds a little dummy down, but I would say a true product that's been well thought through, that has good IP, FDA, that knows where the home's going to be as they start to look at the market. Raising money isn't as difficult as you would think it would be. It becomes very challenging when you're constantly trying to raise capital bolted onto what you're doing, and you're increasing your overhead, your burn rate, and you're not showing on how you're going to stand this up and move this forward.
But a lot of this is burn, right? I mean, getting it through all those V&V testing, getting it through all those phases, that's just money going out the door. Now, granted, it's an investment in the future, okay? But what investors want to know is, okay, that's great. You're going to do all this V&V testing. You're going to get your manufacturing set up. You're going to prove yourself. How are you going to return my cap? How does somebody prove at this stage I can return your investment?
Yeah, but there's good burn and bad burn, right? The good burn is you're really bolstering up your IP, and you really have something that the market's asking for, and you're using it to create that valuation in the company in the early stages, before you even start to drive top line sales or build a sales plan or sales infrastructure or look for a strategic or distribution group. So good burn is, and investors will see this, that they really have something that even if they look for strategic, there's going to be interest, but they always have that go-to-market plan ready. So I'm not worried about the burn. I mean, there's a lot of companies that develop a really good burn. The bad burn is when you start, building, you want to be in Marina Del Rey and you want to have a big office and you want to show everyone you got a view of the ocean and you got all these employees and you're the, cool kid on the block, right? That's the bad burn. And investors see through that too. They truly do. They're not blinded. I mean, if you're going to mislead investors, I'm sure there's some that you can find in the outskirts that don't understand the industry, but a true investor who understands the industry, and they may not understand it from the go-to-market granular perspective, but they understand when there's good business leadership in place to really scale a company. And that's having good management around you.
I had an investor tell me once that they look at that as vanity burn, right? If there's a lot of vanity burn, then they're running because that's a concern. So, yeah. So
I'm in Orange County. I'm surrounded by it. So
I can't believe that's a thing in California, Frank.
Well, that's why we're in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah, there's no really nice country clubs in Louisville, right, Vas?
Not that I'm aware of.
And there's no horses or anything near you.
No horses whatsoever.
Yeah.
And no
vanity.
bourbon.
Yeah, no vanity. No big hats. Nothing like that to foster vanity. So, Rob, Frank and Vas talked about this, right? This is the prove yourself type of critical stage here. So how am I, as an investor, supposed to look at this mythical project and product and technology and company that we're talking about here? How do you help build confidence in me at this stage that, okay, you're doing your V&V testing. I'm thinking about giving you potentially some money, being part of your cap table, being part of this raise, whether it be a Series A or pre-Series A. What are some of the things that I'm going to be looking for potentially right now that you can help instill confidence in me that I know you can take this money and do something beyond just V&V testing?
Yeah, first of all, I do want to address the burn rate Frank was talking about. And Vas, in your area, the burn rate applies to what horse you're betting on at the Derby, and it may be the wrong one. That's a lot of burn there.
No, that's how majority of inventors with the development.
But and I take that analogy into the area of investing into med device, and what is it going to take to solidify a rock solid plan to carry it forward for the validation process and commercialize it. So there's a lot of different types of things you can do, but first and foremost, you got to understand not only your market you're going to, but what's changing in the market for the good or for the bad. How are you going to be the differentiator of your product? What problem is it really solving? What is it bringing to the market in a way of its economics? I mean, we all are hearing a lot about the tariffs right now. How's that going to impact that market, especially even with some of your competitors' contracts that are in place? So there's going to be a lot of moving parts to this. But first and foremost, to really just make it simple, you got to know your market. Where in your market, for example, if it's in the U.S., is your target going to be mostly in the Northeast? Is it going to be to a particular type of specialty? Is it who's going to be the users? There's a lot of that preliminary effort by Vas and his team to find out, the validation or truly, is there a market out there that they can now build around to provide an efficient product, but also a better product?
Hold on, Rob. I'm confused here for a second. I'm making this product to make $1 billion. My primary target market is the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about? Northeast and help me understand that. I don't.
Yeah,
this is in my slide deck. My slide deck says $4 billion U.S. market. That's where we're going after. I need to do all this V&V testing, and I have to hire 600 reps to do that on day one.
Yeah, again, you're digging deep into the data to find out where the majority of the market share is and who is it by. What's that going to be? Is that going to be your commercialization to, first of all, when you hire your sales reps, you're going to hire them to where there's more opportunity in most cases. Now, with a product, the product could probably apply to their target market, but also, is it scalable to something else? Can they capture more market in a different type of area? There's diversification with products. I'm seeing more and more of that with some medical device companies who do want to grab more market share, but not just the targeted one that seems to be in place today. So whenever you look at the markets and the regions, the data behind that of where the sales are, where the usage is, where You can look at what's happening politically that's helped pushing that, again, through not only reimbursement, through CMS. So there's a lot of different caveats to be able to target to that market. When you set up a sales team, guess what? That sales team is also going to need something of value that they can go and take to the market to make it attractive for someone to make a change, what they already may be using, or it may be something that they're not doing real well today that this product can provide that solution. So it's got to be a messaging that goes all the way to the commercialization to be effective with your strategical plan.
So, Frank, is it an effective message to bring to the VC market where I say, hey, I bought this market research report. It said that the market for, infusion pumps is $4 billion in the US, and we're going to get 1%. Only 1%. That's all we're looking for. If we get 1%, we've done well by year 2. Is that a viable argument that VCs buy into?
Well, if you're CEO, you're going to need it to show the board, right? Because otherwise, what lends yourself to making these decisions? I had a company down in San Diego, spine company, right? Their market intelligence report determined where they make shifts, where they make cuts, where they put their efforts out in the field. And they understood that the market was changing, so they needed a different approach from an enterprise perspective to go out there and ink some of these national agreements and work closely with IDNs. And that was all driven by market intel that was coming from them. Because the days of trying to get, a co-sharing program in place with a physician was becoming difficult, because if you had 4 spine guys and you got 2 on board with, risk sharing with the hospital to drive down costs, how are you going to drive it from that level if you got new technology or product that's going to bolster up their existing line? So the approach was to get access and work through portals and take a very different turn than the company had ever done before, but that was all data driven.
Yeah, and that's where I was going with the sarcasm in my question, because I hear it from investors in the investor community all the time, right? So many CEOs say it's a $4 billion market, and if we just get 1%, right, in 2 years, we have done well. Investors don't want to hear that anymore. They want to hear what Rob was talking about. They want to hear what you were talking about. They want to hear what is legit. Just saying 1% and how hard is it to move 1% is not easy. 1%, you have to have a strategy and a plan to get. Targeting certain IDNs, targeting certain regions, that's the stuff that investors want to hear now. They don't want to hear about $4 billion market and 1% movement in 2 years. That's lofty goals. That's just having a dream. It's not really having a plan. And that's where Rob was going and you were going. And that's what I was talking about, right? Your messaging to the investor community can't just be 1% market share by year 2.
No, and I want to add to this because you're spot on, because here's what happens. You got to protect your ASP. That's the first thing you got to do. And everyone talks about grabbing more market share. That sounds great, but are you writing down your ASP to pick up new market share and have price exposure to be back to where you started after putting all this time and effort? So if you're going to grow on that and protect your margins and protect your price exposure, you have to be very strategic in who you want to work with, and you have to know who that adoption who that end user is, and who's going to adopt your product or new tech, or continue to add to what they're existing doing or standardize.
So, Vas, coming back to you on this, right? It seems everything that I'm hearing from all 3 of you is this is a very fluid situation, right? But at the end of the last webinar, we talked about design freezes. Okay. And now we're talking about V&V testing, improving ourselves. How do you incorporate a fluid program with an area that's kind of requiring you to kind of be into a freeze?
Well, I think for most part, yes, it's Frank and Rob saying there is all this research marketing approach that is happening, and it's theoretically, it should have been already happening, as we discussed, right? By the time we're here, whatever coming from market should not change our approach too much. Obviously, there are situations where it can, and they do happen, but theoretically, we kind of standardize them. Our design freeze coming not only from engineering perspective, but also from marketing perspective, also from our user input, to where we expect our changes not to be very significant. And as we were discussing, how do we make our investors comfortable here? I think one of the things that we need to do is to show them the plan, to show them the regulatory plan, to show them the testing plan, and to show them that, hey, we know what we are doing. Here's the steps we're going to be taking. We already did this. We did, for example, pre-DV. We know that most likely our product will pass the testing. We're feeling comfortable. We picked the right materials. That were picked previously for the similar applications. We did analysis of our predicate devices. We know exactly the testing that predicate device did. We're going to be doing the same testing and more. And basically, you have this path that is clear. And if you do, the chances of you not going through are minimizing with more and more research you're doing, with more and more testing you're doing. Yes, there is a potential, for example, not being able to pass some kind of manufacturing validation here. But with more testing that you do up front, the less chances of your failing are. And if you do have a minor failure, you're usually able to rapidly adapt to it and pass again. So the planning and pre-testing on as many features of your product as possible are incredibly important.
So it makes this stage so critical. From what I'm hearing from the three of you here is you have to have your product, all the specs, all the testing, all the requirements, all the regulatory solidified, while also having a vision of the future and having some pre-set up regards to market capability, market acceptance, et cetera. So, Rob, I'm going to turn it to you here for a question. You referenced before getting your ducks in a row, doing some market research, et cetera. What are some of the areas I can start? Where are some of the methods? Where are some of the places I should go to start lining up some of those that market data and market research?
Well, you definitely got to go to the sources that have current validated information and intel. Because if you're going to look at a business similar to like if you went out and bought a house, you're going to go and look at who seems to have the house that best fits with what you're wanting as a family, but who has the information that best fits your business. And how does that apply to your long-term strategy as far as the information you're going after? Case in point is between Vas and Frank and myself, we're very much interlocked, because without the development in the concept and also knowing more about the market, it's very difficult for him to engineer a product or under concept and develop. But then with Frank, I mean, obviously there's going to need to be money. If the angel investment isn't there, then where are you got to get your money from? So you have to have some information that's going to help solidify your messaging and also your pitch deck to be able to have an investor that's willing to spend the time and the money in looking for when the returns are going to be there too. But yeah, as far as the information, there are sources. I mean, there's universities, there's documents out there. Like I said, for those who like, and I think you brought it up before, who want to go and Google is good from a level of surface information. The other day I went and typed into AI and asked it a question, and it was interesting what information it was giving me back. And I'm not going to mention which one it was, but then I went in and Googled it and tried to bypass the AI, and the same subject I had 5 different answers to. So you really have to get some credible information from the university level, from the FDA, from the government, from there's a whole plethora and a list of things that you go, this is where I need to go to at least get not only current, but information that's been validated and it's a proven source. And when I say proven source, it's something that you have an experience with sometimes to say, I've used this before. It's good information. You never know if it's going to be the absolute, because guess what? We have another day coming up tomorrow, hopefully. So things change. It's very dynamic, very fluid. But
go ahead, Rob, finish your thought.
Yeah, but that's really one of the big parts is what is it you're looking for? Mm-hmm. Are you looking to validate what you think your product and how it fits in the marketplace and how much potential sales could take place? Are you looking for maybe some type of features that was part of the concept design to see if it really is going to be your next step to mitigate risk out in the marketplace and improve the quality of healthcare and increase the safety of it? So there's a lot of different things that as you look at this data, how does that help you carry the message forward, like I mentioned a minute ago, to your sales team, to have a very strong messaging for the commercialization? Excuse me, I've got a little bit of allergies today where it's 70 degrees in the south.
We have a rule on my team. You're not allowed to talk about the weather if you live south of us, okay? So Vas will appreciate that. Go ahead, Vas.
Right. Thank you. I felt so sorry for him. I don't know. But yeah, I think I think we're all touching upon this, and I'm probably going to repeat it, but it's incredibly important. Throughout the project, by the time we reach this point, as I mentioned, we should know where we're going for most part. And throughout this project, whatever the project it is, we should be communicating with our customer, whoever invented it, whoever is planning to sell it. And we need to make sure that all of us, customers and us to whatever degree, communicating with users, making sure that users are using the product and making sure that that user is not only inventor and their friends, making sure that those users are spread throughout the countries, are in different hospitals, doing maybe a little bit of different things. And if you do that, you will have a good product. But yes, I have seen projects that end up where the product is being released, all the testing is being done. FDA, you have a 510K and you give it to the doctors and they cannot use it. It's just not working. And then you have to, if you have money, you have to go back to the beginning and start over. If you don't, you're done.
Yeah. Well, that's why we talk about that critical aspect. This is a critical juncture. Your technical specs have to be solid and your market plan has to be solid. So we got two questions in from the audience here. First, to you, Frank, you'd referenced the product execution plan. So with a product execution plan, is this a stage where people should be identifying exactly what their go-to market strategy is? Is that the expectation from the investor community here? Does it have to be specific? We're going to hire these people. This exact group of people is how we have it. And this is how we're going to go out to the market and target. Or is that still too premature at this stage?
Well, you got to figure that out. I don't think it's ever premature. I would say this, depending on the category. What do I mean by that? Is it a physician preference item? Is it biologic? Is it a med surge? Is it an OR orchestration or a SaaS model? You have to understand that, which at that point you do. And based on that, it's going to determine how you're going to start to develop your scope of work and your deliverables to build that value readiness to go to market. I'll put it this way. Here's what most companies do wrong, right? Their value proposition, it just doesn't resonate with strategic decision makers, VAT teams, KOLs, whatever you want to call them, right? Those are the committees you have to get through. and then it lacks any type of support or health economics. You got to look at the health economics, where it fits in. Does it fit into a DRG? Are we talking ICD-9, combination of both, CPT codes? The list goes on, right? Obviously, capital would be a different pathway. And then you're looking at, how do you position your clinical-based messaging? Is it generic, or are we talking prospective outcome studies? Are we talking retrospective studies? All of that is impactful, because as you go to market, you got to understand these hospitals, these non-acute care facilities, they've been servicing their patient population for 40, 50, 60, 100 years without your product. Now you're going to tell them you need it? Well, you better understand what you're doing if you're going to bring it to them.
So, Frank, let's build on top of that. The second question was, what are the top 3 things VCs prioritize in a pitch deck?
What are the top 3? Well, assuming your investor really understands the market, they're obviously looking at EBITDA, they're looking at top line sales growth, and they're looking at market penetration.
Yeah, but EBITDA is just a projection at this point. You have no idea what your true EBITDA is.
Well, if you're doing your homework, you can start to figure out your fees that are going to go to GPOs, fees to distribution, fees to management, fees to the sales infrastructure. I mean, it's just part of doing business. And that's why you got to get your cost, all your costs up front, dialed in, because, it's going to be predicated on where you're manufacturing, how you bring it to market, what's that distribution channel look like, what's procurement. So all those moving parts have to coincide with your plan to move the market. And then you determine, how you spread out, the rest of the fees to everybody else, all the different entities. A lot of companies don't build that in. I mean, I had a company that literally said, we can't distribute through this channel because we just don't have any margin in the deal. They put a price out there with no market intel to back it up. And then we had nothing to play with. And then, we got to go out there and grow top line sales. Almost impossible. You're almost upside down in every deal.
So pricing is such a science, right? There's a massive science behind pricing. And it's something that you just illustrated. People get it wrong. All the big companies get it wrong. Forget the startups, right? We see that repeatedly. So
yeah, they get it's interesting, because list pricing's I smile because they get list pricing wrong, because what they do is they come up with their list pricing, and then we start to structure their tier pricing and what's that's going to look like when you bolt onto an IDN or GPO, right? So there's typically a tier 1 or an open access tier, and then there's a tier 1, tier 2, and then there might be a super tier, right? But then they don't show that delta of what they're offering to the market versus their list pricing, because they didn't even get their list pricing right. And then you always ask leadership, and I'm not trying to call anybody out, but you ask them, and it's like, where did you come up with that? For the most part, we just made it up. There was no basis for that.
Well, in my history, what I've seen is people fall primarily into 2 camps, and I'll say 40 and 40%, with the 20% being ideal. 40% start with what's our cost and what's the margin we want to make. Not a great way to start, right? Yeah. Are you protecting your margin? Yeah. But you're way out of spec with what the market is. The second way is, what's the competitors offering? Let's come in at, above, or below their pricing, strictly benchmarking. Okay, at least there's a little bit more science behind that, but is that viable, right? What makes your pricing viable? And then there's the 20% that just actually has a better scientific approach to it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, do you agree with that kind of baskets, those 2 baskets?
Well, I kind of go, I do agree, but I take the approach of what market you go into. So let's pick on med surge, okay? You're coming into a med surge category, and it's congested, and you're up against large cap companies, and you're coming in with new technology, which, by the way, we think it's new. The hospitals look at it as unproven technology. So that's why you got to bolster up your health economics and your clinical data to show that you're beyond just calling it new. It's more impactful. But then you got to say to yourself, where do I fit into that cost structure now? Right? Am I trying to sell capital with the disposable? Am I doing the razor blade model? And if I come in and I'm providing the capital at no charge, and I'm doing a ratio program or cap table, you have to understand what that cost structure is associated with the end user and how it fits into that DRG, because they're already looking to take money out. If you're doing a knee surgery at, a DRG of 20,000, and you're coming in and they've learned to live with their current incumbent at a price point of, say, $10 on a disposable, and you want to come in there at 15, why would anybody take that on? We've survived 30 years without you, right? Show me that this leads to better outcomes. Show me that this helps with length of stay and eliminating that, right? Show me it helps with biofilms or taking out any type of infections. Unless that price shows value, it's hard to get within that DRG.
So, Rob, how do I get smarter about pricing? Instead of just saying cost basis pricing or market based pricing, how do you advise your clients to approach the pricing conundrum?
Well, I go back to what you do so well, Skender. You talk to the customer. I mean, that's first and foremost to really understand what they have. Like Frank was just saying, if you use the same product for years and years and years at this price, it's important that you know that. So, but other ways to go is go look at the companies and go look at what their financials are reflecting in their quarterly and annual reports. Do the due diligence on being able to go to some of the sources I was referring to a while ago to find out what the pricing truly is. There's reporting agencies that can pull this data up. There's some very good ones out there. There's some questionable ones, but you've got to go and find out what your competition's doing. But also you need to find out not only if they've got that product at that price, what kind of contracts do they have, similar to what Frank was touching on, that actually cuts into the discounting of that product and price. And what does the whole market, what is the market that they're going after, and what can they afford to do from the level of not only feasibility, but profitability to the investors. And if it's a publicly held company, they're having to deal with that even more so. So it's the information source that they're going after, knowing your competitors and what they have and how you really can compete in the markets that they're in, the market share they have. Because sometimes you'll find in the Northeast, your product will yield better pricing than it would poorer areas throughout the country, where they have to go and cut in the price just to compete in that marketplace because they don't have the same revenues or the same reimbursement. So it does vary, and it's important to know these type of things.
So, Vas, what percentage of the inventors that come to you do you feel that have a strong grasp on actual pricing, a viable market pricing?
I would say not all of them.
That was a nice way to put that.
I think there is a lot of, this product is sold for this, so I have to be coming in under these. So basically, is one of the models you point out. There is a lot of some product they just don't know, right? Because it's not out there yet. So they have some kind of idea of where they're going to be, but where they want to be. But they do not have a true market research at this point to know for sure. I think the bigger problem arises when you start developing $5 product because that's where the customer wants to be, but they want to put additional $20 worth of features on it and still have it for that same $5. I think that's where disconnect comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you advise clients in the design and development phase to kind of rethink that?
Well, I mean, it's all about what they want to have, right? Is it an entry-level device? Is it a device that, do you want a Honda Civic or do you want a Ferrari, right? I mean, there is a reason to pay for one or pay for the other. Where do they want to be? And by adding these certain features, how much are they really truly increasing the price of the device, the value to the user? And basically kind of walking back and forth, what is the must-have, what is actually working for the best, and which feature can be removed completely.
Yeah, I think that this is an area that just so many organizations stumble at this critical phase. There's so many organizations that I know that just get stuck in this phase, right? And they keep trying to power through, and they keep diluting themselves and raising little bits of money. And from what I'm hearing from each of you is, come to this phase with more intelligence. Come to this phase with better expectations. Go ahead, Frank.
Well, let me give you a little, not to make it more confusing than what it is, but let me give you a kind of a little reverse scenario we're dealing with right now. We got a company that's publicly traded that's doing well over 100 million plus, but they play in the physician preference, physician offices, right? And so they have reimbursement. Now they want to come into the acute care. Well, that reimbursement doesn't mean anything in acute care. How do you match up against your competitors? Because now you got to fit into a DRG. And when you're publicly traded, you have to be mindful of what price exposure you have out there. And you got to get it right, because as you get more adoption and you get standardization and uptake and compliance, working with strategic IDNs or GPOs, right? How do you say that? How do you save pricing for super tier, for example? You know, there's GPOs that have, hey, you get on and there's four suppliers in a particular category, but then one gets, the heavily compliant program where there's only one supplier, but they promise you 80% market share, right? So you can just see how impactful it is. You have that market intelligence to be prepared to grow your business and have those price points coincide with those different entities that you're going to be in a position that says, give me your best price ever, right?
Yeah. So, gentlemen, we've kind of reached the top of our time. We've probably gone a little bit over, and really want to appreciate the audience for their questions and for being with us through this time. I guess, as we start to think about, the next stage in our webinar, where we're going to be focused heavily on commercialization, right? I'll ask each of you just to talk about, what is the key thing you want to leave the audience with in this critical stage? What do you want them to think about and walk away from this webinar with before we start to migrate into real commercialization? So Vas, you go first, please.
Well, I think risk management here is incredibly important, right? You have a lot of things that are known, right? So basically you have to do whatever you can to mitigate the risk, right? As you say, we have investors, we have expensive testing coming up. What can you do with less expensive tests? What can you do with the less effort to minimize the risk that is down the road, right? Is it to pick the right material? Is it to do initial DV testing? Is it do initial just a break test, like, or see what other things are out there in the market and try to adapt something that is already working? Whatever you do, minimize the risk going forward.
Risk mitigation is a huge part of any strategic plan. Great input. Frank.
Yeah, I put it on myself, right? If I'm going to the market and I'm starting a company, I want to know what space do I fit into? And what's that look in the non-acute and acute? Maybe it's both, maybe it's one. But I want that speed to profitability. And I want to show my investors how quickly I can get there. And the only way you can do that is have a dialed in plan and do the market intelligence. You got to decide early on, do you want this to be a lifestyle business, or are you really going to stand up a company? And what's that going to look like in 2 to 5 years? And I see too many lifestyle companies out there.
Good. And Rob.
Well, the devil's in the details, similar to what Frank was just referring to. It's the true intelligence about not only the market, but your customers. And I'm a big proponent on making sure that you reach out to your customers, you have enough feedback from them all over wherever your product's going to be sold, not just one centered area, because there may be a whole different concept, a different utilization. But the intelligence behind this, like anything else, if you're going on a vacation, you're going to map out how you're going to get there, right? Well, that's exactly what you've got to do here. You got to know what your points of not only interest is, but the critical points to create a rock solid business plan. And that's what Frank's piece, especially with the investors, but also with Vas, it's important that he has some of that information up front. So it really spreads itself across not only the industry and the market, but it really dials it down to the customer who really has the best interest of mind, along with yourself bringing the product to market.
Great. So my parting shot here is going to be, in the corporate world, we've all at one point either come across Franklin Covey, or we've had Franklin Covey training, we've read the book, 7 Habits, etc. The key takeaway from that is begin with the end in mind, right? Mm-hmm. Too many people enter this process kind of looking at just the tree in front of them, as opposed to working backwards. And that's what all of you are talking about, right? This step right here that we're talking about, this pre-commercialization step, is so critical. But if you haven't started the process with where do I go, thinking about price, thinking of DRGs, CPTs, market sectors, market entry points, what validations do I want, how do I want this to be manufactured, etc., and you aren't working backwards, this is where you get in trouble. This is the stage where everybody sinks. The ones that succeed start with that end in mind, and when they get to this stage, they're already thinking the next stage. So that's where we're going to go with the next webinar. Here is talking about that critical commercialization stage once you've gotten all your approvals and you've hopefully received some capital to get those sales engines and marketing engines going, maximizing that success. We'll have a date for that webinar here in the near future, but we encourage everybody to continue to listen and be part of our webinar series. Please check us out on YouTube and LinkedIn. Like us everywhere we are. In the meantime, we look forward to receiving any additional feedback that any of our audience members have. All the panelists here are respective experts in what they do. Please reach out to them. They are all too gracious to just provide you with additional insight. Don't go this alone. Make sure you get an expert to support you. So with that, thank you to our entire audience. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate the time and wish everybody a great 2025 until our next webinar in the near future. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.